response. That work is already underway. Today, as the country grieves, we are seeking answers. I want to speak specifically about the firearms used in this terrorist act. I'm advised that there were 5 guns used by the primary perpetrator. There were 2 semi-automatic weapons and 2 shotguns. The offender was in possession of a gun licence. I'm advised that this was acquired in November of 2017. A lever-action firearm was also found. While work is being done as to the chain of events that led to both the holding of this gun licence and the possession of these weapons, I can tell you one thing right now: our gun laws will change. There have been attempts to change our laws in 2005, 2012, and after an inquiry in 2017. Now is the time for change. There are obviously questions being asked of how this person was able to enter the country and undertake this act of terror. I have instructed ODS to report to Cabinet on Monday on this sequence of events with a view to strengthening our systems on a range of fronts, including but not limited to firearms, border controls, enhanced information sharing with Australia, and any practical reinforcement of our watch list processes. I want to come now to what people can expect over the course of the day and beyond. The safety of New Zealanders is our highest priority. New Zealand Police remain on high alert. Christchurch residents are strongly urged to stay home if possible and stay safe. Please monitor the police website and social media for further information. If you see something suspicious, then please call 111 immediately. A number of events are being held across the country today, and there will be an increased police presence. Police have additional patrols out on the streets of Christchurch to reassure the community. They have flown in 45 additional police staff to Christchurch, with a further 80 staff arriving today. The additional police staffing includes public safety teams, detectives, tactical specialists, and intelligence support. Staff from other DHBs have offered support as required. There will be additional support provided in Christchurch for mental health and psychosocial needs. If anyone needs to speak to someone, or if they're feeling distressed in any way, I encourage you to call or text 1737. There are extra staff available. That number to call or text again is 1737, and that line is available to anyone, whether they've been directly involved in these incidents, whether they're residents or Christchurch or not, anyone in New Zealand who's feeling any kind of distress. The police are aware of distressing material relating to this event being online and are reminding people it is an offence to distribute objectionable material. I want to touch briefly on activity to date and the response that occurred yesterday. So just to recap, police immediately secured the areas involved and ensured that people were kept safe, including schools and offices being locked down. Police made arrests swiftly, and as I've said, a man will appear in court this morning. Defence specialists quickly moved to assist police to make the improvised explosive devices safe. I want to make special mention of those who are involved in both the parts of the operation involving disarming explosive devices, but also undertaking the arrests themselves. Many of you may have seen the footage of the arrests, and I can only describe it as an act of bravery on behalf of all New Zealanders, and an act that showed very little regard for their own personal safety. I'm sure everyone in New Zealand wants the acknowledgement of the police, but particularly the police officer who made that critical arrest yesterday. I also want to acknowledge ambulance staff who many will have seen acting swiftly under horrific conditions, and all medical staff who continue to work with those who are injured. New Zealand Defence Force at Burnham Camp yesterday were put on standby to assist police in Christchurch. Mosques around the country were provided with advice from police to help keep them secure and advice to remain closed. This advice continues, as does the police presence at mosques around the country. The national threat level was raised to high, and that remains. This triggers a number of actions to help keep people safe, such as increased aviation and border security. A number of specialist family liaison staff were deployed. Close liaison has been established with the Muslim community and other key people in Christchurch. Police and the wider government will be working with leaders and members of the Islamic community to provide assistance, reassurance and support. An 0800 number established to register missing persons, 0800 115019, and a website, Restoring Family Links. MFAT are acting as a liaison point for foreign governments. Consular representation for any foreign nations involved is being provided. At this stage, we understand those involved include Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Bangladesh, Indonesia and Malaysia. MFAT staff are dealing with offers of assistance and, of course, receiving a significant number of condolence messages. Deputy Commissioner Māori and Ethnic Services Wally Homaha has travelled to Christchurch alongside 15 additional ethnic liaison officers to support the community. These specialists will work alongside local staff to support the families involved. They are assisting to repatriate them with their loved ones.
And you've been listening to the Prime Minister of New Zealand give us an update here. Daniel Sutton from our partner network 10 in Australia joins me now from Christchurch, New Zealand. Daniel, what new information did we learn now from the Prime Minister?
Well, she has confirmed that the accused gunman will be facing court just in the next 30 minutes or so here in Christchurch. The charge he is facing is a murder charge, but there are so many victims attached to that charge. The death toll is 49 people and there are still 48 in hospital, 20 of them seriously injured. We have also learnt this morning that a 4-year-old boy is among those who is being treated by emergency services. He has been flown to a specialist children's hospital to get some more help from doctors there. I'm at one of the scenes right now. This is the scene of the second mosque shooting where 7 people died. The other one is about 10 minutes away from here, 10 minutes drive, and at that scene 41 people died. And what has shocked everyone here in Christchurch is not just the level of brutality and violence, but also the fact that this attack was live streamed on the internet. Many people I've spoken to here in Christchurch have seen this video. They are shocked by it, not just because of what it contains, but because it's happened in their neighbourhood, a place where they have always felt very safe and where diverse communities have always been welcomed and celebrated. The Prime Minister has also made an interesting point. She's confirmed that the gunman here had access to 5 separate weapons and that he had a gun licence, and she has declared today that New Zealand's gun laws will change. Here, anyone who is 18 and over and who passes a background check can obtain a semi-automatic military-style weapon, and it appears that that is one particular part of the gun laws that the Prime Minister wants to target now.
You know, investigators have a lot of work ahead of them. They've got the 2 mosques, they also have the vehicle and any other parts of this investigation that needs to be underway. So what are now the next steps?
Well, there was a raid that took place in Dunedin, about 4 hours south of here last night. Police have confirmed that it is connected in some way to the investigation, and people who lived near that house have been evacuated from their property. So obviously police are taking that quite seriously. We've also got this scene still being processed, and the other scene, the other mosque, is still being processed, and it's going to take quite some time. They've got forensic teams which have arrived here to try and go in and photograph that that horrific scene that confronts them inside. I'm also told that there are graves being dug across Christchurch today to try and accommodate the large number of victims who will have to be buried, and in accordance with Islamic tradition they should be buried as quickly as possible, just as soon as police can release those bodies back to the families. At the same time, there are people arriving here this morning. It's early morning on a Saturday. People are coming here with flowers and they are laying them here at the scene, pausing for a moment and stepping back in sombre reflection to try and understand and work out how this could have happened in their neighbourhood, a very calm and quiet neighbourhood.
And I understand that the Muslim community is not a large population, but how are they responding specifically now in New Zealand?
It's about 1% of the population, and something that's always been celebrated here has been New Zealand's ability to embrace and welcome people from other parts of the world and celebrate different religions and different backgrounds. And so the Muslim community here is one that has fitted in very well. There have been not a lot of problems other than a few isolated incidents compared to other countries around the world. So they have been shaken by what has happened. They've never felt the way that they've been targeted in this way before, and so they are deeply, deeply upset by this. People have been told to stay away from mosques until further notice, and police are still stepping up patrols around a number of those sites all across New Zealand, not just here in Christchurch.
Daniel Sutton, thank you. Let's listen back in now to the Prime Minister, who is now taking questions.
That he, under that gun licence, was able to legally acquire the guns that he held. That will give you an indication of why we need to change our gun laws.
Can you tell about your conversation with him?
Yes, sorry, Benedict.
Would you like to see semi-automatic weapons banned?
That's certainly one of the issues that I'm looking at with immediate effect. I've asked for advice yesterday on all of these questions.
Would you consider a buyback program like in Australia?
Again, a bit too early for me to say at this point. But again, as soon as New Zealanders hear that someone was legally able to acquire, as I'm advised, those weapons and carry out this event, that will raise enormous questions with our gun laws, and that is why we will respond swiftly.
What about guns?
All right, we are coming out of that press conference with the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Just to recap her message today, 49 people killed.
We will continue to follow this. Stay with us. We're going to take a quick break, but you are watching CBSN Always On.
CBS News foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer has covered the Syrian civil war since it started in 2011. In her reporter's notebook, she walks us through the battles and destruction still happening almost a decade later.
The early uprisings were really political appeals to Syria's dictatorial president Bashar al-Assad to clean up corruption and to respect human rights. But he responded with force, that is to say, with the Syrian Arab army and its primitive arsenal that included barrel bombs dropped from helicopters. That's something Bashar al-Assad always denied, as he denied that his artillery targeted civilian areas. But it certainly did, as we discovered when we crossed the front line south of Damascus to spend the night with a family in the rebel-held suburb of Moadamia. Going into 2012, the rebels, by now armed, remained upbeat, as we discovered when we sneaked past government security into the city of Dara. But as the rebels gained ground and the government stepped up its counterattacks, Syria fragmented into battle zones. By late 2013, the Syrian government had used chemical weapons on rebel areas to devastating effect. In eye-popping contrast, in government strongholds like Latakia, the war seemed a million miles away. By 2014, things were looking dire for Assad's forces. When we visited Aleppo, the mayor took us onto the roof of City Hall, and carefully keeping out of sniper range, he showed us that half the city was under rebel control. Literally millions of Syrians by then were on the run from the fighting, and we met them everywhere, making do in whatever shelter they could find. It felt as if things couldn't get any worse, and then they did. ISIS declared it was setting up an Islamic caliphate in Syria's eastern desert. That was the turning point. In the fall of 2015, Russia, with its deadly air power, intervened and turned the tide for Assad. We watched as night after night, Russian and Syrian warplanes attacked the eastern side of Aleppo city, one of the very last strongholds of the Syrian rebel fighters. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles east, out in the desert, another superpower, the United States, had joined the fight against ISIS, also from the air. My colleagues covered that front of the war, as in 2016 I had been banned by the Syrian government from re-entering the country. But before the ban, I did get to Palmyra, some of the most important Roman ruins on the planet. ISIS fighters had overrun the site and desecrated priceless artifacts in the museum. But mercifully, they'd left the main buildings intact. The small victory ceremony with a few soldiers underlined the fact that Assad's forces, with Russian help, were gradually taking back control of Syria. But the cost has been incalculable. And what's more, it's still not over. Syrians are still dying in the northwest region of Idlib, the very last violent pocket of this century's most complex, bloody, and heartbreaking war. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, London.